Hey folks, Valentin the Mad here, and today we'll be looking at the blood effects in Suit for Hire. I came across it on Math Chief's Game Expo and it just looked really cool to me. A top-down, very much John Wick inspired hard gun game. And as you can see, blood effects are also a focus to some degree, so in this video we'll have a look at those, analyze them, and talk about what can be done to make the game deliver a more responsive experience. Let's get right into it. So first up, there is no dismemberment or any kind of big mutilation. But you do have wounds. They will appear at the point of impact, and you'll often see entry and exit wounds. They're generally not bad. It's essentially a dark red spot, kinda looks like a blood-soaked area, and for this type of a game, it delivers very decent basic feedback. There are several issues though. The wounds will get bugged, and this issue will not be uncommon. I don't think I've seen wounds appear for the knife executions. But you will be seeing them appear for the blunt melee hits. That looks really out of place when you have the same response for a punch and a gunshot. I think the solution could be several pre-made responses on the face that would make it look really messed up, and just nothing if the hit was on the torso or the limbs, where you have claws. As you know, I'm generally not a fan at all of pre-made responses, but for something like this, in a top-down game where the view is in most cases from pretty high up, I think it would be appropriate. As for the blood spilling, here's what we have. You'll see respawn stains on impact. On the fatal hit, you'll see more stains spawned around the character. Sometimes it can resemble a trail. At other times it looks more like spurting. But very often it will just be random spawning around the character. And you'll see blood pools below dead bodies. All of those work consistently, however, there are issues. The most obvious ones are that the blood pools will in most cases get on top of the character. And in many lighting conditions, the color of the blood will look off. But the absolute biggest issue in my view would be the looks of the stains and some issues with the activation. What you have is a very condensed looking stain, and there's a lot of small splatter all around it. As you can also see, there is very little sense of specific direction in most of them. They're basically just kind of like centralized, kind of like a small blood bag exploding. You have a blood bag lying on the ground, it explodes, and here's the result. Now in some cases, that definitely is appropriate. Let's say you shoot a character right against the wall. Lots of splatter coming out at a very high speed from the exit wound, and since the character is close to the wall, most of it will be condensed, with some splats on the outer edges, as we have here. Same for this execution. The initial response in this instance looks very good. Even without a specific sense of direction, those stains work here very well. But the issue is that those stains are used for literally everything. The initial response, the bleeding, and melee too. The aftermath of punching a character to death can look like you just did a number on him with a chainsaw. That really cheapens the effect. When you have big, explosive stains for every instance, and lots of them every time, it just ends up looking like stain spam. The result will be messy for sure, but it actually won't deliver that strong of an effect. The solution, well, not exactly a simple one, but I think it would be worth it, and that is specific stains for the various instances with a sense of direction when that would be appropriate. So for gunfire hits with no wall right behind the character, you would see a much more spread out pattern on the ground behind with some sense of direction. For bleeding after the fatal shot, or for any bleeding effect, the trail could appear below the character or the wound instead of spawning stains randomly around them. In this case, that is blood pouring down from the character and not explosively exiting the body with a bullet, so the patterns should look much milder. The main concern would be to have them look right in the context of a blood trail. For melee, just mild draw patterns would look quite good, and instead of a big blood pool, perhaps a small puddle below the head would do. It's one of those cases where less is actually more, and that is the main takeaway here. More and larger stains is not always better. When the response for a shotgun massacre looks the same as beating some characters up, that's an issue right there. I think that in this game, with the top-down view and with its art style, the blood spilling could, and probably should be, the strongest aspect in the response department. The suggestions here are largely based on spilling we already have in game, and while specific stains is definitely much easier said than done, I really think it would be worth it. Now as for the mess in the long term, there is a very high limit for bloodstains. You won't be seeing them disappear in a fight. The bodies seem to stay, I haven't seen any of those vanish, but the blood pools will disappear in a minute with no way to configure that as far as I could find. As for the animations, you'll see responses on impacts, ragdolls on death, and executions. The execution moves are quite cool. There is a decent variety of them, and they are well animated. A few specifics I like about them. The stomach stab one is very nasty. And on this execution, you will often see the head pushed quite forcefully on the shot, and that also looks very cool. Doesn't happen every time, but delivers a strong effect when it does. The issue in this aspect is that, outside of the executions, all the other deaths will be a simple ragdoll. Personally, I think an active ragdoll mechanic would be a good fit here, with some variety between short and somewhat lengthier responses. In conclusion, for a very basic response for gunfire, this type of wounds would generally work. The issue is with them getting bugged very often. The animation responses definitely need something beyond just a limp ragdoll for non-execution deaths, but the other aspects of it are alright. And as for the blood spilling, it definitely needs work. I see a lot of potential there, and I really hope that it will be fleshed out to what it can be, with specific stains for the various instances and appropriate amounts of blood. And as for the game gore side, I think that the concept and the art direction are really cool. As I mentioned, it immediately caught my interest as soon as I saw the trailer. And generally, I did like it. The movement feels good, the shooting is also definitely fun, I do like the fast TTK, but the issue I do have is with the melee. With the limited ammo you have in the game, you will find yourself resorting to it quite a lot, and currently it is lacking. I believe they are planning to enhance it during early access, and in my opinion, it is the gameplay aspect that at the moment needs attention the most. So that's it for today. Do let me know how you feel in the comment section, and if you enjoyed the video, subscribe and share it around. And consider supporting the channel on Patreon. For as low as $1 a month you get these videos a week early, you get the interviews a week early, and you help out the channel. So a big thank you to all the Patreon members, and consider joining as well. Also, if you like the music you hear in the intro, outro, and in the background, the YouTube and Spotify playlists are in the description. Until next time.